All right, let's shift a little bit to talk about the market opportunity for electric vehicle charging equipment and some of the available incentives. So the market for EV charging equipment is certainly driven by sales of electric vehicles. And here are the trends over the last decade for EV sales. What we're seeing is an ever-increasing market share in the US for electric and also plug-in hybrid vehicles. And what this points to is a complex and changing market with lots of players and stakeholders. There's consumers, and their demand rises and falls for various reasons. They may want different models, they're looking at prices, and they're looking at fuel prices. We also see regulations change as different government figures pass laws and pursue enforcement differently. And we've got manufacturers who make plans, respond to market demand, and keep innovating, all in sort of a constant cycle of iteration. And then installers are offering services, connecting with consumers, adjusting their prices, adjusting exactly what they offer. Again, all in a sort of ongoing feedback loop. Many folks articulate this market shift in transportation as well as industry and buildings with one word: electrification. As technology and energy markets change, the economic and technological arguments for all electric systems are steadily increasing. Fossil fuel prices have always been volatile. Folks are used to seeing gasoline and diesel prices rise and fall with the global price of oil. But the cost of electricity tends to stay a lot more stable. Mostly it goes up when fossil fuel prices, such as the methane gas used by so many power plants, go up. As renewables like solar and wind account for ever more of the electrical grid's energy, we see prices stabilize because there are no ongoing fuel needs for those power sources. The sun and wind are free. So those prices need not rise much. That's something to think about when buying a new vehicle.
Let's look at some of the incentives that are available for EV charging in Virginia. If you're in Dominion service territory, there's several residential programs available. There's a $125 rebate on a level 2 charging device. There's also a $40 annual incentive to participate in a demand response program once you do have a level 2 charging device. There's a newer program in which Dominion will install a level 2 charger at the customer's home. The customer then pays $40 a month over 5 years, so there's no upfront cost to the consumer. And then there's also off-peak rates for homes with smart meters, and that's going to allow EV owners to pay a lower rate during off-peak hours. So ideally, they can schedule charging during those hours to help reduce the EV fuel costs. And some chargers, as we've mentioned, will let you program that information into them in order to optimize when the car charges. And then we'll talk more about this on the next slide, but Dominion also has a program for commercial and multifamily properties. AEP customers can make use of an off-peak EV charging plan that saves about 15% on off-peak charging costs. It does require that an additional meter base be installed and that the installation be done by an electrician, and that's going to be at the customer's cost. AEP also has rebates up to $100 for buying a level 2 charger. The Inflation Reduction Act also revives a credit for electric vehicle chargers that initially expired on December 31st, 2021. The Alternative Fuel Refueling Property Tax Credit is extended through December 31st, 2032. This is for homes and businesses in designated low-income areas. For homeowners, they can get a tax credit of 30% of the EV charger installation cost, up to $1,000. Additionally, there's the IRS tax credit, which allows up to 30% of the project cost, up to $600, for an electric panel upgrade that may be needed to add a circuit for an EV charger. At the end of October 2023, Dominion released a new program for multifamily and commercial property owners, which allows them to receive an incentive of 50% off of EV charger installation costs upfront. The remaining 50% of that installation cost is then paid off on the property's electric bill over a 10-year period. With this smaller monthly cost, it gives property owners the ability to charge users a rate per kilowatt hour that would allow them to offset that monthly cost.
Here's one more emerging feature of EV charging that I think is real important to discuss. And it became extra relevant to me just recently because I was thinking about buying a battery for my home. And I was researching those, and they're around 10 kilowatt hours. And then I remembered that, wait a minute, there's a battery 4 times that big sitting outside my house. my vehicle. And it's most of the time it's sitting there. And I thought, well, why would I buy this separate battery when, which is only a quarter the size and won't do as much as that very large battery in the vehicle. And this gets to what we call vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, or vehicle to load. And what this slide right here shows is how that EV charger could go both ways. While we've talked this whole time about power coming from the building or the charging station to the vehicle, well, why couldn't power go from the vehicle to that building? In particular, what I was thinking of, to my home. So it just requires the vehicle to be ready. Some are now, very few, but increasingly manufacturers are thinking about this. And then the charging infrastructure has to be set up to be bidirectional. So this slide is just showing how the vehicle could send power to the home, much like a solar array could send power to the home, or even the electrical grid sends power to the home. Then we're thinking about, well, I wanted the battery in part so that I would have electricity when the grid was down. And that requires the home to be what we call islanded, separated from the grid. So I don't feed back power to the grid when the rest of the grid is down. And so that's just a little more wiring and technology going in place to make that happen. And then finally, there's even a third option that isn't really about the home itself, but just the fact that the vehicle itself is a rolling power plant in some ways and could charge other things. And I know, like, for example, that's part of how they're marketing the Ford Lightning, is that it has a plug right on it to plug in your power tools. So all of this speaks to how EV charging is an evolving zone, because that large battery in the vehicle is such a flexible tool that can be put to so many uses.